In this video, I'm going to be making Bechu kimchi, which is the classic kimchi everyone knows and loves, which is made with Chinese or Napa cabbage. Very first thing to do when making kimchi is to prep the cabbage. Some cabbages will come with the outermost leaves already taken off, but if yours still has the outermost leaves on, go ahead and just remove them. And then I'm making 2 cross cuts on the base of the cabbage, just deep enough so I can get my hands in there and split the cabbage in half and then into quarters. I'll then take each quarter and then chop them up lengthwise like this, and then I've got a large pot next to me to keep all the cabbage in. I'm going to sprinkle all the cut up cabbage with sea salt to help draw out some of the water and to help soften it. Now the amount of salt isn't too important because we're going to wash it off later, but it's best not to really overdo it too much. And now I need to let this sit for a few hours to overnight for the cabbage to soften up. But in that time, we can start on the rest of the ingredients. So when the cabbage is ready, it's just a matter of coating the cabbage and then just leaving it to ferment. I have some Daikon Radish, which I'm going to cut up into sticks. I'm going to use this mandolin that cuts it into sticks, but it's probably easier and safer to do it by knife. And then I'm cutting some small green onions into similar sized pieces and then throwing that into a bowl along with my Daikon Radish. And next we need to make our kimchi paste. Starting off with an onion and a rather large handful of garlic, which I'll throw into a blender. I'm going to blend it into a paste, but I also ended up adding some fish sauce to the blender to help this blend smoother. I'll set that blended paste aside and to a small saucepan pour in about 500 milliliters of room temperature water and around 2 large tablespoons of rice flour. I'm going to start bringing this up to a boil while constantly mixing until it reaches this thick consistency. And then I'll add the onion, garlic and fish sauce paste we made beforehand and then give it a mix. Follow that up with the Gochugaru, which is Korean chili flakes. There are different types of Korean Gochugaru, but the stuff that I'm using in my kimchi was labeled for kimchi making and was also labeled as spicy, but note you can get different levels of spice for Gochugaru. See, I've never actually measured Gochugaru when making kimchi. Instead, I just like to keep track of the consistency of the paste while I'm adding my Gochugaru. I'm slowly adding and mixing in more Gochugaru until the paste reaches about this consistency here, where it should be able to coat and stick to all of our cabbage pieces. And now we'll set that aside to cool off and check on our cabbage. You can let your cabbage get more soft than this, but I'm going to go ahead and wash my cabbage under fresh water and then wring out as much of the water from the cabbage with my hands before transferring to another container. And just to be sure, I did a second round of wringing the cabbage with my hands. Now to build our kimchi, I'm going to add the Daikon Radish and green onions to the cabbage, toss to mix evenly, and then I'm going to glove up because I'm going to start mixing in the spicy kimchi paste we made earlier. Of course, making sure it's plenty cooled off now. I'll start with a few scoops of the kimchi paste, toss it into combine, and then add more until it's nice and evenly coated. You can give your kimchi a quick taste now and it should be a little bit salty and spicy. If not, you can either go ahead and mix in a little bit more fish sauce or salt or gochugaru. It's entirely up to you how you want this to taste. But if your kimchi is tasting about right, it's time to ferment it. I'm using a glass jar to which I'll begin packing the kimchi into, making sure to press it down as I fill. I like to add a layer of plastic wrap or a plastic bag to the top to prevent air contact and then close down the lid of the jar. I'm not using an airtight container for this. You can use an airtight container or jar, but always be careful to burp this as it can ferment quite quickly. And to be honest, looking back, I maybe packed a little too much kimchi in this jar as it started to leak kimchi juice after a day or two of the rapid fermentation. I also ended up with a little bit of leftover kimchi paste, so I decided to mix it with some of my leftover Daikon Radish to make a bit of radish kimchi. I only like to leave my kimchi to ferment at room temperature for about a day or two before moving to the fridge, although a lot of Koreans like to put it directly into the fridge to ferment slower, giving you a bit more time to enjoy the kimchi at its different stages. So about 2 days on the counter and then up to a week in the fridge will make for a lightly fermented kimchi that is best eaten fresh as a side. The kimchi is going to get a bit of that fermented flavor from those first few days on the kitchen counter, but moving it to the fridge should make the fermentation slow down and let the flavor develop. But with that said, the kimchi is ready to start eating, and from now on this kimchi is going to live in the fridge, and slowly we can let this ferment and taste it at every stage of its fermentation.